Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. Mastering the Next is a cutting-edge podcast exploring the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of technology and artificial intelligence. Staying competitive in the world of graduate student recruitment and enrollment means keeping up with the ever-evolving tech trends in higher ed. Join Dr. Ray Lutsky, VP of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451, as he explores what's next at the dynamic intersection of student recruitment and leading-edge technology. Each episode will explore future trends and the technologies shaping the academic landscape of the 21st century. Listeners will be equipped with strategies to meet the evolving needs of today's online and non-traditional learners. New episodes drop every other Friday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Mastering the Next wherever you get your podcasts.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to After Further Consideration, a special 5-part DEI-focused pulse check series brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Dr. Cody Nielsen, Executive Director of Convergence Strategies, independent scholar, and adjunct faculty throughout the United States.
And I'm Dr. Tomika Ferguson, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence and Assistant Professor in the School of Education at Virginia Commonwealth University. We're sitting down with seasoned change leaders for candid chats about responsive leadership, addressing campus crises, navigating institutional shifts, and fostering sustainable change, all through the lens of equity and inclusion.
Each episode dives into real-life challenges, lessons learned, and the innovative solutions some of the brightest minds have developed to tackle these complex issues.
Our goal is to help you drive positive and inclusive change in your campus. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Today, our guest is Dr. Kevin McDonald. Kevin McDonald is the University of Virginia's Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Partnerships. He joined UVA after serving as the Chief Diversity Officer and Vice Chancellor for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity at the University of Missouri System and the University of Missouri-Columbia. While at Missouri, McDonald established its first diversity strategic plan that was integrated within the UM System's overall strategic plan. And prior to the University of Missouri System and working at the flagship campus, McDonald held positions at several other universities, including as Vice President and Associate Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Rochester Institute of Technology, Vice President for Equity and Inclusion at Virginia Tech, as Associate Director for Compliance and Conflict Resolution at Johns Hopkins University, and as Campus Compliance Officer at the University of Maryland, College Park. McDonald holds a law degree from The Ohio State University and a doctoral degree in higher education leadership from the University of Rochester. He received his undergraduate degree in psychology from Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, how are you all doing? It's great to be with you both, Tomika and Cody.
We are great. Thank you so much.
It's a great day to be with you and really excited to have you on the podcast. You know, Kevin, Tomika can put all these words on the page and we can share all these things. But as we sort of start today, I think our audience is going to want to know, like, how did you end up at UVA? Like, take us on that journey. And so we want to sort of start by like hearing a little bit about your story in higher education and sort of what led you into this position that you're in and sort of your backstory. So help us take it from the top of like how you ended up here.
Yeah, great question. I can honestly say that I fell into higher education for sure. I was a law student at Ohio State, and I come from a Caribbean family. And so there was an expectation that I was going to join a law firm that we had established in East Orange, New Jersey. But they were engaged and doing incredibly well in law that I wasn't as enamored with. So I kind of I felt like the black sheep of the family because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I had a cousin in medical school at Hopkins in Maryland, and I came to visit him and fell in love with the Maryland, D.C. area. And I thought it was a unique place to live. And I was also engaged to be married. And so I had convinced my wife to agree that this was like the land of opportunity. My wife had been married before and had a son as a product of that marriage. So the deal was that I had to find a job. And if I found a job within that year, that they would both move out to Maryland. And if not, that I had to move back to Columbus, Ohio. But I thought that would be really easy. But 7 months in, I still didn't have a job, Cody. I was actually about to say, okay, this is what my law degree had been reduced to. I was going to apply for a manager and training program at 84 Lumber. And I said, well, let me just wait one more day. And I went home and there was a voicemail message from the Department of Justice. And that was really my first job. So it was investigating complaints of discrimination under the ADA. Which was great. And I think was really served as an entree into kind of learning more about work, advocacy, the challenges, and kind of equal opportunity civil rights. I was listening specifically, investigating prison systems and listening to these heart-wrenching stories from inmates who were not provided with accommodations, from physical to medical. And I think for me, that was one that said, okay, this is the space that I need to be in. The challenge was that job didn't come with benefits. So my wife said, well, what happens if we get sick? And I said, well, that wasn't the deal. You told me I needed to find a job. I did that. I didn't win that argument. My next job actually was with the Network Solutions at the dawn of the internet. They were the domain name registrars, and I resolved disputes between trademark holders and domain name registrants all over the world, which was great from a conflict resolution standpoint, not so great from a familial standpoint, because I was working 6 a.m. to well after 9 p.m. But honestly, if my wife was on this call, she would say, tell them who the real MVP is, because she actually found my first job in higher education in the newspaper and apply for this. Was not introduced to higher education as a field, but fell in love with it. I applied for the job, got the job, and started working at the University of Maryland investigating complaints of discrimination. I was an N of 1 that did that for the entire campus for faculty, staff, students. I did it there. I also did it at Johns Hopkins, and then I had an opportunity to kind of direct or lead my own shop. And so that's what led me to Virginia Tech. I was recruited to go to RIT. I worked with the president there at the University of Maryland. So those connections are important. And I did that until he retired. And then I was recruited to go to the University of Missouri at a time that nobody thought that anybody could be successful going there after the protest. The position I held there was one of the demands of the protesters. But I loved the experience, and my belief was that it was an opportunity for high risk but high reward, right? And if I could leverage the things, the skills, talents, and abilities that allowed me to be successful in previous positions there, I could do well there. And then ultimately I was recruited from there to come to the University of Virginia, where I've been for the last 5 years and have just been renewed for another 5 years. So it's been a grateful experience, a tremendous journey. I learned a lot in all of those experiences. In fact, when I was at the University of Missouri, I remember the students saying, if you want to be successful here, you have to be transparent and visible, and you can't overpromise and underdeliver. And I think those were really wise words that I've used here as well at the University of Virginia.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think that journey is so important for folks. And I will say that, going back a little bit, I think one of the first things that you said is you were 7 months into looking for a job out of law school. And, I will tell you a little bit, from my story is that I graduated with my doctorate in December of 2019. I was living in Minneapolis. I had sort of decided that I was going to end up staying in Minneapolis as much as possible. And so I was like, okay, I have my PhD. I'm going to go out in the work field. And then COVID hit, and that was a disaster of higher education, epic proportions. I was like, am I going to fall back to being 19 and working at the grocery store? So I think it's just an important story to remind people that people have these really good bios that look, very flashy. And then you forget that it takes sometimes a stroke of luck and sometimes just resilience to get where you want to.
I think that's a great point. No, and I think that's exactly what exemplified my experience, because there were times that I wanted to give up. It was a struggle. but I was committed to finding out what I wanted to do, what I felt called to do. And I was looking for the opportunity to have something resonate with me. And up until the time it hadn't, but I think working at the Department of Justice, although it didn't come with benefits, what it did do was create an eye-opening experience. I mean, when I heard from inmates who had contracted the HIV virus, who said that they were not being provided medical attention because the wardens didn't believe that inmates had any rights, right? Or those who used wheelchairs and needed access to access the showers, and it wouldn't install ramps. And so they would have to climb out of their wheelchairs on these bacteria-infested floors, put themselves in vulnerable positions to ask for other inmates for help. So it was really a tremendously eye-opening experience. I'm grateful for it. It was hard work, but it definitely charted me on a path in both the equal opportunity civil rights, but also the DEI space.
So, Kevin, I think this part of that story, going back a little bit, to this idea of the transitions that you had, I love hearing these stories of when partners help find the other person their job. And then you didn't have that sort of that background in higher ed and didn't know that it was a sort of field. That's the same thing that I feel like a lot of folks have. They just don't know about this as a field and certainly don't know how to navigate to be in positions like you're in. Yesterday I saw in some Facebook post somebody that was like, does anybody ever get above the assistant director level? And I think that there is something about that. But I also think it comes down when you're in positions of leadership of figuring out how to hone your skills of being able to navigate really challenging circumstances, make incremental gains on things. And so, one of the things that we really want to talk with you about today is like, if you can sort of share, through that journey, some of those crises or some of those moments that you're open to sharing a little bit about that sort of defined you and your own path into this field where you are now.
Yeah, I think there were many for sure. First, let me say, I think one of the important leadership traits in navigating any organizational environment is recognizing the benefit of being politically savvy. I mean, I think, our degrees, I think are great at getting us looked at and getting us in the door. But I think our ability to understand the organizational politics and to be interpersonally invested is what really helps us remain in that space and advance. So I do think, a lot of that, a lot of the success that I've had has been attributed far more to those things and any of the degrees that I've gotten, for sure. And they also became useful when I was navigating a crisis. So there are definitely a number as I reflect on. But one that I'll share is I worked at an institution, and the provost of that institution instituted faculty diversity requirements. So at the end of every year for the annual faculty activity reports, he instituted a DEI requirement so that faculty could share their efforts around the DEI space. All seemed pretty benign, and in fact, very supportive by and large by the community, like, oh, this is a really good thing. But there were some faculty who were not pleased with it and shared their disdain with a conservative organization that ultimately wrote a scathing letter to the university's president. And the president, in response to that letter, announced that the requirement was going to be removed, that there would no longer be that requirement. And the campus community just went ballistic. You had a group of faculty, staff, and students who were enraged. There were protests. They were planning to go to the board with a vote of no confidence for the president. And I was in the middle trying to navigate, both as an administrator, but also one who had some credibility with the community to kind of navigate this experience. So I asked them if they would delay their desire to go or delay going to the board with a vote of confidence and first meet with the president and maybe other members of the leadership team. They agreed to do that. I went to the president and asked if he would consider doing the same thing. And he said he would. He also announced in a leadership cabinet meeting that the removal of that requirement for the annual requirement for faculty was his decision and his decision alone, and anyone that disagreed with it, he would be willing to accept their resignation on the spot. Right. So we had all of those things going into this meeting. So the meeting was scheduled, and I encouraged him to come in the meeting and mix and mingle within the group of protesters. And we had agreed on that. But when he came in, he and other members of the leadership team kind of sat in a line. It felt like an us versus them situation. And there was a tenured faculty member who was really the spokesperson for the group and had a list of recommendations or demands, a copy that she was reading from, but also a copy for the president. She handed the copy to the president, and the president threw them on the ground. And honestly, Tomika and Cody, I felt like I saw my life flash before my eyes. I felt like within a matter of hours, I would be probably getting a pink slip. I don't think we had cell phones at the time, but if we did, I would have said, we need to start. I would have texted my wife, said we need to start looking. So I waited for a couple of minutes, but it felt like eternity. And I remember asking the president or reminding him that when we met in preparation for this meeting, he said, in order to kind of trust this process and engage in the process, you have to go in good faith and not in an adversarial posture. And I said, I'm going to ask you to do something that is going to be difficult and uncomfortable to do, but is as uncomfortable to ask. I'm going to ask you to pick up the paper, and I'm going to ask the spokesperson if we could start again, going to hit the reset button. And he waited another couple of minutes. Felt like, again, another eternity, but he picked it up. We hit the reset button, and it resulted in $1 million or $2 million that supported faculty recruitment, retention. There were a number of things that resulted from it. So we went from something that had no promise at all to something that it had promise and helped to resolve that initial conflict. So anyway, I was pleased with that, but that definitely was something that I was in the middle of and had to navigate. And I don't know that you ever anticipate that when you take these kind of roles. But I will tell you, after having navigated that and going to the University of Missouri after the protest, that you feel battle tested and you almost feel like, okay, I've seen and done just about anything. So it's not much that I think scares me at this point.
What's so interesting about your story is I think a lot of times when we have reflection or there's a case study or a discussion about a crisis, we always focus on the decisions made, who won, who did not win. I want to kind of take a different angle on this because one of the parts of this podcast is to really explore you as the leader and what your positionality was in this. And you said a couple of things that I think are significant and also a unique opportunity to learn from so many folks. You used words like you felt that you were in the middle. There was this creation of us versus them. And you also shared a vulnerability in response to watching like this actual physical throwing down of recommendations and demands. What I'm interested in is, as a chief diversity officer, how do you navigate that unique space, right? How are you managing up while also trying to manage the entire situation that you're watching unfold in a way where you're trying to focus on belonging of all folks, but you still are a cabinet member? And that's a very unique space that very few get to see and hear the nuance and balancing that. So could you maybe unpack that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, they often talk about to expect the unexpected, but I just had no way of expecting how this would unfold in that way. And honestly, as a result, I didn't have any preparation for what was going to happen next and how I was going to respond or intervene. But I did know one thing, that if I didn't do something, it would fail and that I would likely lose my job. And so for me, it felt like, okay, I don't know what it means not to fail, but failure feels like it shouldn't be an option. And so as a result, you need to think quickly, think on your feet, and see if something you might be able to suggest might be able to intervene in a way that would give this an opportunity to start again. And honestly, I use this example as a case study at a leadership institute, and the attendees could not believe that it was real. I mean, they were like, "Ooh, I'm glad this isn't real. This is crazy." And I'm like, "No." So part of it for me was this notion of, failure isn't an option. The one strength that I felt that I had consistently throughout my professional career is the ability to connect with people, interpersonal communication skills. So I had built up a level of credibility with both the faculty, staff, and students, but also the leadership team and some trust with the president. So I felt like I could try to leverage that in a way that I felt like there was no hidden agenda. My hands were above board, but I really just wanted us to give the best opportunity at an outcome, right? And how could I portray that in the words that I would say? But let me be really clear. I was fearful. I was still also scared, like, man, I don't know that this is going to work out. And so this may be my last time, engaging with this group, because I just did not see a scenario, since I was the one that recommended this. I was the one that recommended the conversation, and it had gone so poorly up until that point. I felt like I would have been the target and the brunt of any backlash, from both sides. Like, Kevin, you said that, you wanted us to trust that the leadership was committed to this, or the leadership team wanted us to trust, and you put us in this position. So anyway, all those things went through my mind. But I also just believed enough in myself and believed that I honestly felt like the dialogue was an opportunity for us to achieve something special and potentially resolve something, or reach some compromises or some concessions that would maybe not fully satiate everybody, but satiate people on some level. And so that's what I took into the process, and just trying to think quickly on my feet. I felt like, what could I do that would allow the spokesperson to actually give this another? Because she could have easily said, okay, I knew this was a ridiculous idea, I'm walking away. But if the president would, in essence, put himself in that vulnerable position to basically say, almost admit through his physical actions that I had made a mistake. Like I did something in error that wasn't going to give us an opportunity to start on a level of equal footing to have this conversation. Let me, hit the rewind and reset button, pick this paper up and start again. And so that was really my angle.
But what I appreciate about what you're saying is there's this level of reflection that we do as leaders where it's like, this was my idea, but just because it's an idea doesn't mean it's going to be successful. It's not going to happen the way we plan. And I don't think that there are large spaces where that level of vulnerability and reflection is saying, listen, thinking about a pink slip, I'm thinking about moving my family. Like, the seriousness, the heaviness of that reflection in the moment, while trying to also be committed to the integrity of the idea that you presented, it definitely is a challenge. And I wonder, do you feel as though even outside of this particular crisis that you introduced to us and in other spaces, do you feel that coming through that still allows you to take more risk because you believe in yourself more? Do you feel like that moment that you were able to navigate through has strengthened you as a leader, particularly in a very vulnerable and hostile at times space within higher ed?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly if as a leader, one reflects on the experience, on the kind of learning nuggets, the takeaways, then I think you can use that and keep that in your toolbox. And so when I went to Missouri, for example, I had a great mentor who told me, Kevin, you made some great career decisions, but if you go to Missouri, I think this is going to be a career killer. Right. And this is someone I respect tremendously. And I said, gosh, there's in that continuum of success and failure, there's so many things that you could have said. You said, I have no choice, but I will fail. And I really felt from my experiences at this institution that I could learn from that experience and use those takeaways in ways that, people may not be aware of what I went through, but I'm aware of the skills, talents, and abilities that it helped hone, right, from going through that experience that would prepare me for what I would be entering in or engaging with at the University of Missouri. And I think it has benefited me. And I think going there, then even with that level of adversity, even in the aftermath, helped, again, prepare me for the future. So coming to the University of Virginia after what happened here in 2017, I've had a level of confidence just and a belief in myself and my approach to those situations that I felt like if I just stayed true to that and didn't become intoxicated with any role or forget the trails that have been blazed before me, the shoulders I'm standing on, and the work ethic that I put into previous positions to have some level of success and engagement with communities, I felt that I could be successful here.
Yeah, I think about like all that you're sharing here, and I wonder, like, okay, so you're in this sort of position of senior leadership now, and a lot of the folks that end up in positions, they sit that maybe that one tier below, that sort of middle rung of management that sort of reports to a position like what you're holding. And I'm wondering, like, what kind of advice would you share for them when they're maybe not able to be in those positions like you're in? How do they also lead and show leadership, amongst the campus when they may not be the final decision makers?
Yeah, I think people should develop a belief in themselves and this notion of leading where they are, right? So even before I became a vice president, I always had that as an initial goal, right? That's what I want to prepare myself for. And I remember a mentor telling me to reflect what you expect. So even before being a vice president, I wanted to carry myself after watching other vice presidents or watching other leaders carry myself for the role that I expected to be in one day, right? I wanted to develop the skills that I thought would be really important, the ability to develop relationships, the ability to understand the politics, and honestly, the ability to recognize that not everything is going to be rosy, that you're going to have some hills and valleys, right? Someone said that setbacks are just setups for comebacks, right? And so I go into any of my roles recognizing that my goal is to have more successes than failures. It's not that I'm not going to fail, but a coach who has one more win than losses, right, is considered a winning coach. And so that was my kind of goal going into this. So I think anyone in any of those positions with aspirations to advance need to recognize that they have the ability to lead where they are and to look for the areas of affirmation in their roles, but also the areas of opportunity, because the areas of affirmation will be things that they can continue to build on and build some strong foundations on, but they may not have been things that they have introduced. They may be building on the work of others. But the areas of opportunity are, I think, where they have the most ability to build legacy, right? And so those are the gaps that need to be filled, and to be thinking strategically. They don't all have to be done by one person. Maybe you leverage your cross-functional partners to lead collaboratively to have a transformational impact. And for me, that's the goal. So for everywhere I've been, I always go with those two things. What are the things, the areas of affirmation that I can build on? Doesn't matter the role, doesn't matter the title. Every role has that opportunity. And then what are the areas of opportunity that actually I can fill in that will most notably be associated with my work, my role during my time, my season, my journey, right? And those to me have been, so I have those things everywhere, right? On some level, the areas of affirmation are me kind of paying homage and honoring those who've come before me and laid that ground. That's great. I'm never going to be that leader that says, oh, that was their thing, I'm going to change it and scrap it and start something fresh. I think that's ridiculous and ludicrous. So I build on that, but I'm always looking, what are the gaps? What are the gaps that have been here that I can actually fill and work strategically to fill? Because those are what is going to be associated with my work. So I try to do all of that while also learning the organizational politics. And sometimes, honestly, I'm not asking for permission in every space to do it, right? Particularly if there are gaps, that means no one has been able to fill them. So if I can fill them, even if they don't meet the current vision of the leader, usually, more often than not, the leader's like, wow, that's great. I'm already thinking ahead. There's a level of appreciation for me being able to fill in those gaps. So I will do those unapologetically, not in ways that are going to damage the image or the brand of the organization or my leader, but I think in ways that are actually being supportive and helpful, and not waiting to be often told what the gaps are, but actually doing my due diligence to determine what they are. And I think that's helped me a lot in my own career advancement.
That I'm so inspired. And I'm inspired because I think in higher ed, as a professor and administrator, I'm always having these conversations, particularly with like the doctor of education students, our PhD students, about what it means to be a critically reflective practitioner. What does it mean to actually sit with yourself and reflect over the situations that you've gone through? How do you learn from them? How do you adapt to them? We talk about it through leadership classes. We talk about it through mentorship. And sometimes it's something as easy as, just pause and reflect or journal. But in your story and the narratives that you're sharing this from someone who's been in these type of roles across institutions, across geographic difference, across institution type. And it's a valuable perspective because how you're discussing it is, it almost seems like this seamless practice now for you to be intentional, for you to be purposeful, for you to be guided by this intrinsic notion of service and of giving and of belonging. And so this is good to hear. What I'm saying that I do and what I teach is showing up in my practice, but it also makes me think that there are some decisions that you had to make just as a human being. And I'm interested in more of that self-care and that self-preservation. So what are some of the things that you do as a senior leader and as a leader who's been in that space of the president's cabinet for a while now? How do you take care of yourself? How do you develop what we're hearing as a part of your daily practice in your life outside of being this higher education leader?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Tomika. Before I answer, let me just go back to something that you said that I think is incredibly salient for the work that I do. And I think it is a driver. I'm appreciative of the role that I have in this space because I wake up every day with the ability to positively impact the lives of people, right? And I don't take that for granted. And I'm incredibly appreciative of being granted that opportunity. And every night when I lay my head on my pillow to go to sleep, I reflect on what I've done that day. And I'm like, have I still held true to that? Am I doing that? And then the last thing that I often ask my team members to do, I ask people across the colleagues that I work with, if I am not, this is what I want to positively impact the lives of people. I want to be a transformational servant leader. If I'm not doing that, if I'm not upholding those principles, call me out. Like I'm not so much a leader and I want to be protecting myself from the critique. I have to be open to that as well. And so if I'm failing at any one of those, help me out because that helps me recalibrate. So I will say all of those pieces are incredibly important for me. I'm an only child from East Cleveland, Ohio. And I believe that like I can't go back to East Cleveland and have people in my hood say like, oh, you acting brand new. You got a couple of degrees and you coming back home like, no. And so for me, I don't want to be that kind of person that is acting brand new in any situation. I'm grateful for every opportunity. I have enough confidence in my skill, talents, and abilities for sure. I don't ever want to let that cross over to arrogance, right? Which I think is a big difference. But I truly am grateful for every place that I've been, rural, urban. I have appreciated every experience, every community member, everything that I've been exposed to. I appreciated all of those times. I went from Maryland to Blacksburg, Virginia, right? And loved Blacksburg. Great community, great alum. So I'm just saying every experience I've been able to at least take out these pluses to all of that. But all of that being said, when I started in the field, I felt like I was invincible. I felt like I had batteries that would never run out, right? I was the only person that was doing the Title IX, the discriminatory harassment prevention investigations at the University of Maryland. At that time, they were like 46,000 students, faculty, staff. I mean, and I was loving it. I was like, oh my goodness, I can do this for the rest of my life, right? But at some point between there and Hopkins, you do start to get burned out, right? And the notion of self-care wasn't prevalent in my mind. I was like, I don't have time for that right now. I got to serve. I got to, work hard and in advance. But I had a great mentor, still have a wonderful mentor who was my boss at Hopkins, who said, you're no good to this work, right? If you're not taking time out for yourself, because the work is going to be there unapologetically every day, right? So you have to consistently build in time for yourself to rest, recharge, recuperate, recalibrate, or at some point the work will overcome you. Like you will not be able to have the impact that you want. You may think you're having that impact, but you won't be. And so he said, you have to unapologetically take time out for yourself, for your family, for your friends, to pour back in and determine what that is. And so for me, I do that. I think that's important. I have a big workout regimen. So I love to, I had to find the right time and balance. So I'm going to say something that sounds like it's probably not self-care, but for me, it's self-care. When I was working on my doctoral degree, I went to law school right after undergrad, but I waited to go back for my doctoral degree. In part, honestly, maybe this is a whole nother part of a whole nother discussion, but I was working at an institution and they said, look, Kevin, you're doing great work. If only you had a terminal degree. And I said, wow. And I said, okay, so they didn't look at my law degree that way. And so I felt like, honestly, in my own journey as a person of color, that I felt like I had a different standard to live up to, right? That, I believe I work for a president who has a law degree, right? So I said, okay. So I said, I'm going to go back and get that law degree. Now I have them both, right? But I went back when I was, serving as a vice president. I had 3 children, married. And so in order to not infringe upon them, I started getting up really early in the morning, like 3 o'clock in the morning, so that I could kind of try to get stuff in until I finished that degree. And then I've continued that. So I still get up at 3 in the morning. I'm done, of course, but I work out. I might have the time to meditate, Bible study, whatever, check email. But it is a time where I don't have to worry about anybody else interjecting into what I'm doing. Like everybody else is going to be dead asleep. And so I've appreciated that. I relish my evening sleep far more now. But anyway, I just say all that to say I enjoy that. I enjoy working out. I enjoy golf. I'm vegan, so I enjoy I'm a foodie, so I enjoy finding restaurants that have good vegan options. So a lot of different things. But I have also carried that into my leadership expectations for my own team. And so I've told my team very consistently that family comes first. However you define that, people, pets, or plants, doesn't matter to me. But when things are going on in the life of those P's, you need to be there because you're no good if you're here thinking about that all the time. And again, consistently, I've modeled that. I try to model that, right? And so I have that expectation for team members as well and consistently. And so I'm appreciative of their work, but I also want them to recognize that I didn't sell my family short because of that, and they shouldn't either. And so I try to also practice that, but I also try to lead in a way that I think that team members can value that as well.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to hear all this and such. I know that we're getting really close to time for today. And so, one thing that I want to say is that I think we're really just grateful for the work that you are doing right now, the work that you have done throughout your career. We could probably have an entire other conversation on some of the pieces that we've done today, but we also, know that there's always more conversations that we can have. And so I would just like to say on behalf of Tomika and myself, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story. I'm certain that there are folks out there that will be ripe to hear more about some of those experiences that you're willing, as time evolves to share. But I just want to say thank you personally for being willing to be vulnerable with us and to come and join us on After Further Consideration today.
Well, it's been an honor. I really appreciate the invitation, Cody and Tomika. Thank you so much. The last thing that I would say, I've appreciated the journey of our conversation. Is definitely very different than other podcasts I've participated in. I really appreciate where you all have taken our conversation. But the one thing that I would also say that I think is really important, both to my journey and I think to the work in honestly, any field, particularly for those people that you said are have these aspirations of advancing, is not to forget to give back, right? To give back, because there are always going to be people who are also looking up at them and saying, gosh, I want to be in that particular role that you are, right? And so the one thing that I've continued to do is it doesn't matter who the person is. It could be a student, could be a community member, could be someone who's aspiring in this space or feel that I have something of value to add. I had a mentor who did it for me. And he said, Kevin, never worry about paying it back. Always pay it forward. And so I always make that time. It drives my assistant a bit crazy because we're always scheduling a new monthly meeting of someone that feels that I have something to offer. But I think it's incredibly important to the field because when I first started in the field, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone. So a lot of this was trial by error. But when I finally had one and started to really impart some of that important wisdom and knowledge, I recognized how valuable it would be to provide to other people who may not have had that. So I would say for all of those in the field, giving back is not just a rewarding experience. I think it is an important part of being a leader, and to never forget that no matter where they advance in their career, to always make time and take time for people that, value them, their journey, and feel like they have something of value to add in their lives. So I think that's an important part. I've tried to do that throughout my leadership experience, but definitely, in my recently roles.
Well, Kevin, we appreciate you so much. And despite the fact that you get up at 3 a.m., I'm never going to judge you ever again. And as a graduate of the University of Virginia, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the impact that you've had on our campus community. We just really appreciate all that you're doing. And thank you so much for joining us today.
This Pulse Check mini-series has been brought to you by Pathify. Gone are the days of clunky interfaces, disjointed systems, and massive, unhelpful link farms. Centralize all your systems with Pathify so that students see the information that matters to them in a digital experience that actually makes sense. From prospective students through alumni, it's about time the student experience started looking and acting like a consumer app from this century. Visit pathify.com for more. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.